they'll be very optimistic about how a jurisdiction will look at what they're trying to do, because the reality is a lot of these cities, especially smaller towns, they've probably never seen one of these facilities that's processing ethanol or butane. So they see explosive hazardous material and they get terrified, like, oh my god, like we don't want to approve something it's gonna blow up. That sounds like a lawsuit. So the easiest way to get through that fast is have a fire protection engineer write what they call a process hazard analysis or a fire protection report, which is basically this document that will analyze all the equipment that you're using. It'll show the process flow. It'll cite all the code sections that are relevant to the equipment you're using. It will provide what they call the engineer peer review citations for each piece of equipment. It basically is just like the cheat sheet for why everything you're doing is compliant. So instead of, we recently worked with a jurisdiction in New Jersey, and we would I would talk to the fire official there, and he'd be like, well, why didn't you do this? And I'm like, well, actually in the code, if you look at the code here, you don't have to do that. But he just had all these sort of assumptions because he had never looked at one of these projects. But if you can, and that particular client, even though we did recommend that they get a fire report prepared at the beginning of the project, they didn't want to pay the extra cost for that.
Feature Downing here, Media Unshackled, with co-host from Cannabis Legalization News,
Tom Howard, Cannabis Legalization News. Likes and subscribes, everybody. And we have another special guest, Mr. Bliss.
So happy to be here. I just wish I had a radio voice like you two gentlemen.
No, she's got a radio voice.
I majored in radio at school.
I can tell.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I was a political science major. Yeah.
I just want to hear you say, Donna Evans, come on down. Something like that.
Oh, yeah. I got to move to L.A. Hey, do you know anybody who lives in L.A.?
No idea.
Right.
Is there somebody in the room? Perhaps?
Mr. Bliss, that's a great name. Did you grow up with that name?
It's not a Hollywood name. People ask me all the time.
Yeah.
Especially in this industry, right?
Mr. Bliss, Hollywood name.
It's not a Hollywood name.
You didn't make it up.
Because people always ask, especially obviously the industry I'm in, Bliss sounds, cannabis adjacent, like
Right.
it would have something to do with that, but it was just a happy accident. No, so I do architecture and engineering. So I've been doing that for about a decade. My whole backstory is I was just, a regular architect, signing offices, houses. Got to work on some projects with Google and Microsoft, some really cool creative office projects. And then about 5 or 6 years ago, I was working for a small company, a small engineering architecture company, and we got one of these cannabis jobs that came through the door. It was a little extraction lab in Oakland, California. And through working on that, I got close with a lot of the vendors we were working with. And frankly, I didn't know that much about cannabis myself outside of, being an adolescent, perhaps experimenting with it years and years ago. But from working on that job, realized, oh my God, this is something architects certainly aren't paying attention to. And there's all these new businesses opening. And there's this need for people that actually understand, how to comply with the codes, how to work with the jurisdictions to get these things passed. And it all just happened very organically. I worked on that job, and then through the partnerships I had, these clients just started flooding me. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I gotta quit my job and do my own thing. And never.
Do you have to, because I started my own law firm, and so as an architect, you need to have your license, and then you can just create your own shop?
Yeah, well, a little small caveat here. So I'm the design director and owner of the company. We have an architect of record that stamps all our drawings, reviews things. We have MEP engineers that we work with. So we're kind of, I hesitate to even use the word architecture because we're more like an all-in design services firm that just kind of aggregates a series of, professionals together to get these jobs over the hump. So
you do cultivations, extraction centers, manufacturing centers, distribution centers, retail centers, all the above cannabis, or?
Yeah, you got it. But what really got me started was those extraction labs, because let's say around 2018, 2019, that was the hot thing in California, was butane and ethanol. And
what do they call them? CD1,
D1D, C1D1, and C1D2.
D1,
So which stands for Class 1 Division 1, Class 1 Division 2.
And that's a nationwide thing?
It is. It's written into the International Fire Code, the International Building Code, which, state by state, they'll make minor modifications to that code structure, but overall it's kind of like the same
Yes.
core
And then
core
would that
codes.
be a different method or solvent of extraction? What's the two difference? Like, why would I need a C1D1 versus a C1D2?
It's a great question there. Nice.
When you start talking details and things that matter, that's where he gets.
Yeah, otherwise I just get confused.
Yes.
I mean, sometimes I am blissed out, not to steal your
No,
last
no.
name and then just
Yes.
high on the edibles.
I'm like that eagle flying high, and he's like that eagle that's like 10 feet from pouncing on the rabbit. Then he's adjusts his tentacles. So go ahead.
Eagles
Man,
don't
these
have
guys are
tentacles.
Master of metaphors, my God.
Exact point.
But that's the dynamic you want. Somebody who's kind of like the
Yeah.
high level.
He's like the fact checker.
Yes.
Fake news.
What do
Let me
eagles
know if
have?
there's any
Fake
fake
news.
news on this.
Claws. What do they have?
But I still want to know what the difference between the two designs are.
Oh,
sorry.
I was going to get to that.
Oh,
Yeah,
correct.
yeah, no. What-
Absolutely.
what-
I didn't forget.
Okay, I'm going to Google what eagles have. Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, so basically C1D1 is slightly more stringent, and that's usually what you're going to use for a butane or hydrocarbon lab.
Oh, okay.
And then C1D2 is going to be for an ethanol extraction operation. Now I can't, even with the jobs I've worked on, I couldn't tell you point by point necessarily what the difference is, but it just has to do with that whole kind of concept in general is you got to create an environment where you have gas detection systems, you have every piece of electronics in that room needs to be spark proof. Because the problem is, right, if you're doing ethanol or butane extraction, if you get a concentration of gas in the air above a certain, they call it LEL, so lower explosive limit, if you get too much of that built up, let's say I got a regular light switch, I turn on the light switch in the booth of the room, whole thing goes up.
And
right?
that has
So-
happened in America.
Oh, very often actually.
And
Wow.
how many times did it happen in Mexico unreported out in the booth? Because I know they're
Doesn't sound
building
like fun.
labs and doing labs and extraction in Mexico.
Yeah,
Maybe not
absolutely.
yours, but sorry.
let's hope not.
No,
um,
I found that out as I was talking to all the equipment makers in the United States, MT BizCon over the years.
Mhm.
And then I was learning about all these shipments that were going to Mexico. I'm like 2013, 14, 15, I'm like, oh, they're extracting a lot of oil down in Mexico.
mm,
So, and then they were bringing it up across the border. My friends from ICE told me about backpackers and stuff carrying oil and not bales anymore. But I
that
don't know.
makes sense. I mean, the volume of the product itself is smaller, right? You can
Yeah.
have
Yeah,
more concentrate.
and this
call
was-
it concentrate.
This was a thing in
Right.
2016, 17, 18. I don't know if it's a thing now. I
Right.
haven't talked to my friends at ICE, but sorry, go ahead. Keep going.
No, and what was interesting at the time too is I was working with a company that made these extraction booths. So even at this conference here, if you walked around, you probably saw Advanced Extraction Labs.
Yeah.
Chris that owns that, I know him pretty well. He's based in Santa Rosa. I saw this other folks I've never seen before. Actually, I think they're called PEB, maybe something like this. It's a 3-letter acronym, but they're also seems to be another extraction booth competitor. But a lot of people rushed into that space because the reality was, I mean, you need these C1D1 rated or C1D2 rated environments. You can either custom engineer one or you can buy this kind of off the shelf IKEA like solution, which is almost what this is. It's, flat packed or it's a shipping container. It shows up at your job site and you kind of just plug, I'm oversimplifying, but you plug it in and you're good to go, right? Versus, and then it generally does also come with an engineered report that, shows how every part of the booth is compliant with the code, and you just show that to your fire official, your building official, and it makes it way easier than trying to create this whole custom one-off thing.
So that's how you began with doing those. That was your start. But now you're expanded out into that whole spectrum from cultivation design all the way to retail. Are you doing that as well?
Yeah, well, and here's the thing, can't give myself too much credit, but along the way of especially during the extraction kind of boom thing, I was like, man, this can't last forever, right? So
Right.
I made sure to kind of, make lots of contacts, make sure I sort of had at least a general understanding of all the other product types I could be doing. So when there was sort of a vape crisis that happened, I want to say that was that 2019 maybe?
Is that with the acetate? That
With
type of
vitamin
stuff that they're
E.
putting in?
Exactly. So all of a sudden, that was the persona non grata was the extraction labs, and then nobody wanted to touch it. I mean, I had clients that we had, completed their super detailed plans, basically threw them in the trash.
Wow.
Sad, very sad. But I'd made enough contacts that I was able to kind of slide right into doing cultivation design, and then I would say within the last year and a half, we started to do a lot more retail.
So most of your business coming around now from retail and what kind of business are you looking for?
I would say we're still probably maybe 20%, 20 to 30% retail. It's still cultivation heavy, just because, I mean, there's just more to think about with cultivation in terms of the engineering aspects. I mean, you can design retail if you have experience designing, generally speaking, if you have experience designing any other type of store, a shoe store, an Apple store, what have you. I mean, the general principles hold true. But cultivation is a lot more specialized. You can't really, it makes it easier to compete against other firms because if you don't have the experience, you don't have the experience. So, but in terms of what we're excited about, I would love to do a consumption lounge.
Consumption lounge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, there's all kinds of little rule changes and evolution of legal structures happening across the country.
Hmm.
And consumption lounge. Are there
Yeah.
consumption lounges in Illinois?
No, and then, well, yes, you are allowed to, but not in my municipality.
Okay.
One city over, you can. And so there's one over there.
They're not in my hood though.
Yeah, right. And they don't like weed where I live. And so they still haven't built that one out. Those guys were kind of like blocking us. And so we were looking at that area of town, but they don't know what they're doing.
Is it
in
like
a lot of-
consumption lounge where you need to be a member?
No, you have to be a smoke shop or you have to be a cannabis dispensary holder, and then your municipality has to not ban it. But that's completely different than like in
Mm.
Vegas or Nevada, where they had a consumption lounge license that fairly similar to like owning a bar, wasn't it? Like you could actually buy weed at the consumption lounge, I thought.
And so that comes into the design aspect too, the legal structures in regards to how the consumption lounges work, whether it's just a consumption lounge that needs to be built a certain way, or whether it's consumption lounge that needs to also be retail kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what. I mean, LA has probably 5 lounges now.
5 lounges.
Yeah, and I met the owner of the original one. They go by the OG Cannabis Cafe, and
Good name.
right, we were walking the site, walking the facility a couple weeks ago actually, and he was just pointing out the way they structure it is they serve alcohol on site, but it's a completely separate address. And when you walk through this door, you're technically walking onto another property. It's
The old
way
loophole.
they-
That's,
But, I
that's
mean,
very often how it is. It's like, oh no, this is A1, that's A2, and something like that, where they have a completely separate address
But-
and a huge adjacent entryway door between the two.
You see, if you do not have let the people have what they want, it's not going to end well for you. See Marie Antoinette.
Oh no, that was completely different. But I'm
Just
more
kidding.
concerned about
Well,
how do they
it's a
design?
highfalutin intellectual.
Oh yeah,
First thing over my
the
head here.
French Revolution
Yeah,
bullshit.
yeah.
Go past
We have
that.
these conversations.
Yeah, we'll
a degenerate.
discuss the French Revolution later over
Okay.
dinner. We'll bore the crap out of the weed map guys. But I want to know more about how they've set up this consumption lounge that serves alcohol. Is there like another sub 2 or something that has its own separate address that is where you can buy the weed, or can I get weed at the consumption lounge?
No, they have table service. Absolutely.
Table service.
Yeah, they'll serve you at your table. You can walk up to the bar and purchase. But yeah, it's just literally trying to think how to describe this. The consumption lounge itself is sort of a rectangle, and then the outside bar area is like a little L that's kind of attached on the edge of it.
Right.
So you walk out and you got your bar there, but you're not supposed to pass through between. They definitely
Well,
don't do that.
Can you hold a joint and a drink in your hand at the same time?
Supposed to as a
that's definitely
concept
not-
that
no.
doesn't go over well with
No,
the cannabis.
Put the joint
consumer.
down, pick up your beer, put the beer down. pick up
Supposed
the
to.
joint. Yeah.
No
Family
cross
shot.
allowed.
So you're CannaCon. What are you doing here? Minnesota.
Good question. I'm still asking myself this here. Marlon,
I mean,
the hell am I doing?
it's an emerging
See
market.
us.
There's 3,000 licenses being issued in the next. No, wait, 3,000 applicants, and then the lottery gonna.
Oh, they just released the numbers of them, and so it closed on Monday, and then there's approximately 2,000 of the people that actually got through did end up applying.
And then they're gonna issue how many?
There's going to be a lot, and so like the licenses, some of the licenses are 3 licenses. I heard the retail license is 5 licenses, and so
A lot of
for
business.
locations, right? A lot of business. The mezzo license might be the one that has the best, for
I keep
what you
hearing that.
do. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's extraction, cultivation, 3 retails, 15,000 square feet of canopy space for flower, which
Great.
is that's a big operation. That could make like 8,000-9,000 pounds a year. And then 3 locations to move your product. The micro is basically a third of that. They're going to give away 100 of the micros, 23 of the mezzos, 35 of the retails. But I haven't reviewed the retail too closely under the statute, but I think a retail license allows you to open 5 dispensaries.
So for those of you doing the math at home, that's potential of about 574 potential places that are going to be built out.
Wow.
Just kidding. I can't do math that fast.
I
I was
You
so
guys-
impressed.
you guys really
I was
think-
like,
It was
oh my gosh.
285.
Yeah,
But, you know,
Is it 285?
yeah.
He can.
Well, I did
I
it
didn't know
yesterday.
lawyers were good at math.
Well, I was doing it yesterday
Yeah.
for a guy, like, you know, explaining to him how they've already pretty
Yeah.
much gone from a limited market state or a limited license state to basically an unlimited license state. And you're already getting down lower than 21,000 Minnesotans per retail location. So it's going to be more like owning a liquor store if they just keep giving out these licenses.
And he's not just good at law, he's also good at math. And if you gave him your engineering schematics, he could probably show you what's wrong with them. So just, you got to be careful with this one.
No, I have never taken an engineering class.
And he knows the difference between tentacles, claws, and talons.
Yes.
Talons. Eagles have talons. Google. I had to Google it, but you know, who needs friends?
What is
when
the
you have-
context on this? Is it a conversation?
He
that happened?
mentioned that
That's
an
the beginning,
eagle
the
comes
metaphor.
down with its
Oh, right,
tentacles,
that's
and I
right,
go,
that's-
"What are you even
that's what you
talking
said
about?
there.
Is this an
Yes,
eagle
sir.
or a squid?"
I track back to those things. So, yeah, have you found some good stuff in Minnesota?
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, my expectations were mostly just educational. I just wanted to get on the ground here, talk to some people,
Right?
catch the vibe, if you will. I
You
mean,
talk to him.
we've
talked.
Okay.
a handful of times.
Yeah,
I think
you
I've probably
learn-
known you
you
for a
can-
year plus.
Oh yeah,
year and a
yeah, a
half.
couple
Yeah.
of years.
Learn the
Yeah.
entire Minnesota structure in 5 minutes with him.
Yeah.
Sorry, but go ahead. So get
I have
down
to
on the
watch one of
ground.
his videos. I've seen your YouTube
He's a
channel.
popular
Yeah,
dude.
A lot going on there. So
Yeah, I gotta make some more of them where I don't swear or put the word cannabis in the title. It'll go way better with the
something tells
censors.
me that
Yes.
yeah, perhaps so. Yeah, because my understanding is, I mean, there's not really anything. I know for this last round of applications, you weren't required to submit any real estate
not.
credentials or
Right.
designs or this or that. So I don't think they're not necessarily needing my service right now. But ideally, you know, I get linked up with some people that in 6 months, 12 months, perhaps need what I have to offer. So
Do you help with applications in different states?
absolutely, actually, we're doing a ton of work right now in Kentucky.
Kentucky.
Yeah, we're working with a real estate group called CanDev.
All right.
Heard of them?
Yeah.
They work all over the country, but they went into Kentucky and acquired a number of properties. You know, whether I don't know the details, whether they purchased or I think they just have the right to lease, and then they have these lease agreements that they're leasing to applicants, and then they asked us to prepare plans for each of the properties so that just to make it easier for the applicants. You've got your property, you've got your site plan, your floor plan, security plan, all the required design documents. Just expedite the process.
Kentucky
So.
going on right now. And
Yeah,
they
about
they
2 more
close
weeks.
about that's
Yeah,
right
2 more
2
weeks.
more weeks, end of the month they close, but it's much more comprehensive. It's not social equity where they try to bring down the costs, and they actually require real estate there. They require a complete application, and then they'll send you to a lottery.
And it is, from what I've heard, it's a pure lottery, right? You pay your $15,000 fee, 15,000 or more, and you get a ticket in the
And so it depends on what license type you're going for.
exactly.
And so like the one that's our bread and butter, and so's CanDev's, would be retail 5 large, but it's actually 155 large because you have to show 150 as your capital requirements, because that's all a dispensary costs. And then you need to lock up real estate, and it needs to be fairly compliant, which is really strange because there's a huge exception for that. And then you need your floor plan for it, and kind of like the stuff that you've been preparing that you have to submit with your complete application. Now, let's say that you do that, you get it, you win. The county has until next year to ban it,
Out. Yep.
and then you have to move the license.
It's very strange, right?
But you move somewhere else.
You can, but then like they broke for the retail, it's supposed to be 11 regions. Well, the regulators decided they want to get sued. So 2 of the regions were supposed to have 6 licenses. And now they've created 2 sub-regions in those where one will have 2 and one will have 4. So your odds have just gotten what I like to call verkackt. And so your odds went
What did you
from verkackt. Like
I've never heard that.
it's
Is that
Yiddish
English
for,
word?
no, it's Yiddish, fucked, or something.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
I learned things from him.
Business Yiddish.
Google that too.
Yeah. And so like now you're probably going to see lawsuits filed because somebody is trying to get into one of the larger areas, and their odds were supposed to be 6 possible rolls of the dice, and now that's down to 2 or to 4. And so that's prejudiced them. I could see a lawsuit being filed to enjoin the regulators from conducting 13 regions when the statute and everything says 11, and there's a methodology for changing the license location. So like they do say, you know, in the 2 big cities, you could only have 2. Great. But what if all 6 won in those 2 big cities? Well, then you would have 4 that have to move, and you would just go in the order in which they were chosen. That's not what they're doing. They did it on the down low. They didn't tell anybody. They updated their website to make like a very, very inconspicuous link. That's all it was. It's not on the application. You can't find it on the instructions. You can't find it anywhere. So it's one of those things where after the window's closed and people realize it, but before the lottery, lawsuit.
You know, if I was Captain Kirk, I would have him, you know, come aboard as Spock, because this man is filled with great information. And you're right, Fakata. It's fucked.
Yeah.
It's
I thought you made it
I
up
have
on
a
the
new word
spot, but
today.
okay. Yeah.
Fakata.
Yeah. And
You
then
know that?
the other one that's really good.
And a whole lot of other stuff.
I was a bank
Crazy, huh?
lawyer before I was a weed lawyer. And so you learn a lot of like, you know, fakakta words. And so then,
I'm trying to get out of the weeds.
yeah, me too. But then the other one that's really nice is ganef.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a little thief.
The world is a lot more beautiful from my eagle, like
Mhm.
10,000 foot view.
Right.
When you get down close, it's an ugly thing.
It can be, especially when you consider the rigged liberal media. Dimitri, do you have anything to say about the rigged liberal
we
media?
don't need to
This
get
is
into that.
fake news.
We'll talk about that in another podcast. But so who should reach out to you and why? What are you looking for out there?
I mean,
Except-
hopefully everybody.
But just ask you why your hair is beautiful? I don't know.
Well, I get that a lot actually, but
You do have nice hair.
Is this
thanks.
Very
because of LA? Like they just have amazing hairdressers there?
Doesn't he have nice hair?
Or is it just
I
genetic?
did.
Doesn't he?
I'll give you this secret. I did bleach it recently. So
No, but it looks healthy. It looks good.
oh, thank you.
So just,
Gotta-
just saying.
Got to keep it moisturized. Keep it natural. Olive oil. That's what I do personally. You know, no artificial substances, ideally. But
So for hairdressers and people who want to know about good hair, what kind of people in the cannabis industry should reach out to you?
well, you know, I think we can bring the most value the
Mhm.
earlier you are in the process of opening your new cannabis business, because something I'll give you a small example. Something we see all the time is folks that will lock in a lease on a former warehouse type building, an industrial building.
Oh my God.
And this is meant, let's say it's 50 years old, it's 100 years old, it's meant for storage. It's, you know, it's for whatever supplies, you know, boxes of some sort.
Yes.
So it's not actually for producing things. So when it comes to your power, you're in trouble. You got 200 amps of 240, 208. What you really need is 2,000 to 4,000 of 480V 3-phase power, right?
Yes.
And that, now I can tell you in California that not only is it expensive to get a power upgrade, it's
Yeah.
very time
Yeah.
consuming.
Do you
So
need permits?
Yes.
you need multiple permits.
Yes.
Is this why California has people leaving because they can't get anything built?
Could be possible.
Oh, overregulation.
But
But regulation.
here's the thing. California is not the only place guilty of that. I mean, I would say, I wouldn't,
Illinois
you
is
can
not
do-
that great either.
oh, absolutely. If you can avoid, well, I've worked actually with, we did a project in Glenview, Glenwood,
Okay.
Glenwood, south of Chicago, where we worked with, I think it's ComEd there, right?
Right.
To do a power upgrade. And yeah, it was as much of a headache as it is in California. So I would highly advise you avoid that headache if at all possible, and
Yep.
just find a building that was kind of purpose built.
Let me tell you.
So-
I mean, that's a great. I mean, there's probably a lot more reasons to get in touch with you than that. But
Sure,
if,
yeah, I
if,
kinda
if
just went
you
on a
know a
tangent there, but-
friend who is out there looking at doing a cultivation business, my God, the number of horror stories
Mm,
that I have heard
about power.
in 12 years about buildings
Mhm.
being purchased to do grows in that they have no idea what it's actually going to cost them to do that grow.
Mm,
And they've talked to
absolutely.
architects or some engineer or some friend who does not know what the hell he's talking about. And they end up getting fakatad. Fakatad? Is it all verb? Fakatad. Fakatad. I like that word. That's my new fakatad.
What- If you want my genuine advice too,
Fakatad?
as an architectural and engineering firm, we don't have all the answers. I would recommend also perhaps involve a contractor earlier on, because
Yeah,
they
but
really,
they
they're,
wouldn't know either. They're not. You guys have the experience. Don't.
yes.
We're trying to market you here.
The only reason I'm saying that is we know the code. We know the code well.
Yeah, but you also have
We know the
experience
process well.
seeing what needs to be changed and what
And
happens.
That part. But contractors know pricing well. They really
You know, you
understand.
gotta.
Oh, that floor. Oh man, that's messed up. That's going to cost X number of dollars.
You definitely should get that
know.
a value. And there's not
So I
so
would
many. Yeah.
recommend get a ideally if you can get sort of almost like an owner's rep or a construction manager early
Yeah.
on, They can help manage costs. Because I mean, I think we're pretty good about that. We're pretty hands-on, so we're paying attention to those things. But sometimes architects are just mostly worried about code compliance, right? So they're running up. Perhaps they're not choosing the thing that's the most cost-effective. They're choosing what's easiest to draw into the plans that will be compliant.
Mhm.
So I think you want to balance those concerns, compliance and cost. So
Good. How do you say the past tense of fakata?
Oh, I have no idea.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we got to figure those things out. Past tense, present tense, future tense, because you don't want to get fakatad.
right,
And that's
right.
so that's the reason. I mean, I have some people that I can recommend you to just thinking about that, but they only come about once or twice a year, but they come about and they generally fail, so, but because they don't get the advice to do the right thing in the first place. So
Right.
that's good that you guys have that you're available as a resource out there for that. And anything else that you can particularly, come to mind in regards to experiences that you had where if somebody got in touch with you faster, sooner, they would have saved money?
A lot of stuff with the extraction. Because I think people they'll be very optimistic about how a jurisdiction will look at what they're trying to do. Because the reality is, a lot of these cities, especially smaller towns, they've probably never seen one of these facilities that's processing ethanol or butane. So they see explosive hazardous material and they get terrified. Like, oh my God, like we don't want to approve something it's gonna blow up. That sounds like a lawsuit. So the easiest way to get through that fast is have a fire protection engineer write what they call a process hazard analysis or a fire protection report, which is basically this document that will analyze all the equipment that you're using. It'll show the process flow. It'll cite all the code sections that are relevant to the equipment you're using. It will provide what they call the engineer peer review citations for each piece of equipment. It basically is just like the cheat sheet for why everything you're doing is compliant. So instead of we recently worked with a jurisdiction in New Jersey, and we would call I would talk to the fire official there, and he'd be like, "Well, why didn't you do this?" And I'm like, "Well, actually, in the code, if you look in the code here, you don't have to do that." But he just had all these sort of assumptions because he had never looked at one of these projects. But if you can, and that particular client, even though we did recommend that they get a fire report prepared at the beginning of the project, they didn't want to pay the extra cost for that. But so there we are on the back end, sort of, kind of trying to make the case for it. But that's why I think that's so important. Just make it as easy as possible for this jurisdiction. So instead of you paying your lease on your building while you're not operating because you're trying to save a few dollars to not do this report, I would highly recommend that.
And on merit-based applications, I assume you have enough good qualifications, credentials, information to help a merit-based application become stronger.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think the design of your facility, the more compliant, the more
Does that work if you submit good documents?
Merit-based applicationing is falling out of favor.
Out of favor?
Yeah.
It's
Most
unfortunate.
states now are, well,
No.
why are regulators able to like read a book and say, "Oh, this is going to be the best"?
Yeah.
And so you're seeing a lot of applications become templatized. And so we're in Minnesota, they had a templatized application. Delaware just released a templatized application. Kentucky did not do a templatized application, but they had a very comprehensive instruction set and matched with a full set of regulations to make your job as, the application writer easier. And then they always give like a 10-day period. Kentucky is very optimistic at how quickly they think they're going to be able to score these. They anticipate being able to score them in a month.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, how do people get in touch with you?
I would say go to the website. It's studioblisssla.com. You can feel free to send me an email directly, evan@studioblisssla.com, and would love to hear about your project.
Excellent, Mr. Bliss. I still like that name. It sounds like a Quentin Tarantino name. We will be seeing you around the cannabis industry.
I think so. I might see you later this month, right?
Yep.
Out in Arizona.
Down in Mita.
That could be fun.
See you there.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. This has been another episode of Mina Shackled.
Thanks,
With
Vince.
Cannabis
Appreciate it.
legalization news. Thanks for our guest.
All right.
Hey.